Papa.
Usual case, Lacey Spears, a Rockland County mother charged with murdering her son by poisoning him with salt.
I had to watch a video of a 5-year-old child being murdered.
In January 2014, Lacey Spears rushed her 5-year-old son, Garnett, to the hospital, claiming he had suffered multiple seizures. Despite being monitored for several days, Garnett showed no signs of seizures, and the doctors prepared to discharge him. Just as they were about to send him home, Garnett suddenly became lethargic and started dry heaving. His initial blood tests came back normal, with his sodium levels slightly elevated but within the normal range. However, Garnett's condition deteriorated rapidly, leading to a severe seizure that caused him to stop breathing. He was intubated, and a second blood test revealed a shocking rise in his sodium levels from 144 to a life-threatening 182. This sudden spike was medically impossible to occur naturally, indicating someone had deliberately poisoned the boy. This case pointed directly to Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where an individual, typically a parent, fabricates or induces illness in another, usually their child, to draw attention and sympathy. Lacey Spears was born on October 16, 1987, in Atwater, California, the youngest of 3 children. Her family relocated to Decatur, Alabama. Soon after her birth, Lacey's parents, Terry and Tina, both had chronic health problems, which perhaps contributed to Lacey's early obsession with nurturing. As a child, she became intensely attached to her dolls, treating them as real babies. This attachment was so extreme that she once attacked a friend who touched one of her dolls, leading to the end of that friendship. Lacey was closer to her grandparents than to her parents, especially after her grandmother's death when Lacey was 10. She often stayed at friends' houses, claiming she had been molested and was too afraid to return home. Although these claims were reported, there was no record of an investigation, and her older sister, Rebecca, doubted their validity. However, given Lacey's later behaviors, these stories might have been early attempts to seek attention. Lacey Spears' obsession with motherhood was evident throughout her early adulthood. After high school, Lacey moved into an apartment with her sister Rebecca and started working at Kids Club Daycare, where she cared for several babies and often worked long hours. Around this time, Lacey briefly dated Blake Robinson, a deputy with the Morgan County Sheriff's Office. Though the relationship ended quickly, Lacey then enrolled at Calhoun College to study nursing, where she met Christy Burnham, a single mother with a 10-month-old son named Cameron. Lacey became obsessed with Cameron, often caring for him and buying him clothes, diapers, and even a crib. However, Christy noticed that Cameron frequently developed ear infections after spending time with Lacey. When Lacey failed to return Cameron after a weekend visit, Christy demanded her son back and cut Lacey out of their lives. Undeterred, Lacey soon attached herself to another child, Jonathan, the 6-month-old son of Autumn Hunt, a mother who used Kids Club services. Lacey began taking care of Jonathan after daycare hours, buying him supplies and posting pictures of herself with him on her MySpace page, making it seem as though Jonathan was her own son. She even took him to various churches, posing as a single mother to receive charity. Despite these unsettling behaviors, Autumn allowed Lacey to continue watching Jonathan, though she too noticed that Jonathan often developed ear infections after being with Lacey. Around the same time, Lacey befriended Shauna Lynch, whose 2 sons, Zach and McKelly, were also in her care at Kids Club. Lacey grew attached to McKelly and began watching him outside of daycare, eventually telling Shauna that Jonathan was her son. Shauna soon discovered the truth and distanced herself from Lacey, who reacted with anger and erratic behavior. Lacey then went to Florida to visit her grandmother and uncle, and when she returned, she was no longer pregnant, though whether she had been pregnant at all was unclear. After returning from Florida, Lacey began a relationship with Chris Hill, a man from her apartment complex. They frequently had cold, emotionless encounters, and though Lacey was obsessed with children, she showed no interest in Chris's son. Lacey eventually became pregnant in March 2008 and announced the news to Chris, suggesting they get married. Though they initially agreed to name the baby Caden, Lacey later decided on the name Garnett, despite Chris's objections. A few days after Lacey Spears announced her pregnancy, she abruptly told Chris Hill that he wasn't the father, falsely claiming that her ex-boyfriend Blake was. In reality, Blake and Lacey had never rekindled their relationship, making her claim impossible. Lacey broke up with Chris and threatened him with a restraining order if he attempted to contact her, leaving Chris to realize he had been used solely to fulfill Lacey's desire for a child. Despite her denial, years later, Lacey admitted Chris was indeed the father. Garnett Spears was born on December 3, 2008, a healthy baby with no complications. However, just 2 days after bringing him home, Lacey rushed him to the emergency room, falsely claiming he had a fever, jaundice, and an ear infection. The doctor found Garnett perfectly healthy, but Lacey continued to bring him to hospitals almost daily, insisting he was unwell. By mid-January, a doctor suspected Lacey had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a rare condition where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in another to gain attention. Despite these suspicions, no follow-up occurred. Lacey's behavior grew increasingly alarming as she brought Garnett to multiple hospitals, often without disclosing his previous visits. At Huntsville Hospital, Garnett was diagnosed with reflux and underwent surgery to reduce vomiting. Shortly after, Lacey's friend observed her hitting Garnett for seemingly no reason, and another friend later saw Lacey screaming at him in a Walmart parking lot, leading to a report to Alabama's Department of Human Resources. A few days later, a pediatric gastroenterologist diagnosed Garnett with failure to thrive and recommended a Nissen Fund application, a procedure that prevents vomiting. Lacey continued to claim Garnett couldn't eat, bringing him to yet another hospital, where a nasal feeding tube was inserted. Throughout these episodes, Lacey posted pictures of Garnett's medical treatments on social media, seeking sympathy and attention from her followers. In February 2009, Garnett was airlifted to the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Children's Hospital of Alabama in Birmingham after nearly fatal sodium levels were detected in his blood. Despite the severity of his condition, Lacey continued posting distressing images of him online. During his stay, a gastrointestinal specialist had no trouble feeding Garnett, contradicting Lacey's claims. The hospital suspected Munchausen syndrome by proxy and quarantined Garnett from Lacey for 4 days, during which he ate normally and remained healthy. Lacey's feeding methods, which she claimed were doctor recommended, were deemed harmful, but Garnett was still discharged into her care on February 24th. As Lacey continued to seek medical attention for Garnett, more red flags emerged. An ear, nose, and throat specialist noted the unusually high number of ear infections Garnett had suffered and referred him to another specialist suspecting Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This was the third time the syndrome was mentioned by medical professionals in Garnett's short life. Despite repeated visits to Decatur General Hospital, where Lacey claimed Garnett was vomiting everything he ate, a physical impossibility due to his surgery, no investigation by Child Protective Services was initiated. By June 20th, Garnett was brought to the hospital, bleeding from his ears, eyes, nose, and mouth. As usual, Lacey Spears posted photos of her unconscious son, hooked up to tubes, on social media, soaking in the sympathy from her followers. Her obsession with Garnett's medical issues grew, leading her to neglect Jonathan, the child she had previously fixated on. Remarkably, Jonathan's chronic ear infection ceased once he stopped seeing Lacey. After a summer visit to Clearwater, Lacey insisted Garnett needed a feeding tube. When Decatur General Hospital refused, she shopped around until she found a doctor at Children's of Alabama willing to perform the unnecessary procedure. Lacey immediately posted a photo of Garnett post-surgery, captioning it with, "Mommy, I feel bad, my belly hurts," a sickening display of her manipulation for attention. Throughout Garnett's first year, Lacey continually brought him to the doctor for supposed ear infections and other ailments, though many doctors began suspecting Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Despite their concerns, Garnett's situation went largely unaddressed, and Lacey continued to exploit his health for attention, frequently posting about his condition on social media. In 2010, Lacey and her sister Rebecca began visiting churches, telling harrowing stories of Lacey's alleged molestation and Garnett's severe medical issues to solicit donations. Lacey's fabrications escalated, including claims that Garnett had multiple serious conditions, like open heart surgery and cochlear implants. Despite these lies, which eventually led to her being asked to leave one church, she continued to deceive others. When her Uncle Bo was transferred to hospice with terminal cancer, Lacey moved to Clearwater to care for her grandmother. In Florida, Lacey befriended her neighbor, Kimberly Phillipson, who quickly noticed Garnett seemed to eat just fine despite having a feeding tube. Lacey's focus shifted from hospitals to social media, where she exaggerated Garnett's health problems for sympathy. She also began exploring holistic medicine, claiming she no longer believed in modern medical practices. As Lacey's lies expanded, she even accepted an offer from a friend to sleep with her husband in an attempt to conceive another child, leading to the predictable collapse of that friendship. Lacey's disdain for doctors grew, and she publicly denounced vaccinations. Throughout 2011 and 2012, Lacey continued to post a steady stream of updates on Garnett's supposed ailments, fabricating new conditions like spinal disorders and severe toothaches. On March 31, 2012, Lacey took her lies to another level by killing Garnett's father in a fictitious car accident. She posted on Facebook claiming that her lifelong best friend and Garnett's father, Blake, had died 9 months earlier. This completely fabricated story garnered a flood of sympathetic messages, and Lacey thrived on the attention. She continued to spin this narrative, claiming that Garnett was struggling with the loss of his father, while in reality, Garnett's father was alive and well, though Lacey refused to let him see his son. As Garnett approached school age, Lacey found the Green Meadow Waldorf School in Chestnut Ridge, New York, which she believed would be perfect for him. The school, part of a commune known as the Fellowship, offered a system where members could work in exchange for room, board, and schooling for their children. Lacey applied, filling out the application with lies about Garnett's health and her own employment history, and was accepted into the community. Upon arriving at the fellowship, Lacey wore a diamond engagement ring and spun more tales about her late fiancé, Blake, who she claimed had died in a car accident. Although she frequently spoke about Garnett's health issues, community members noted that he appeared perfectly healthy. 2 days after their arrival, Lacey took Garnett to the on-site doctor, claiming he had an ear infection. Though she was referred to a local pediatrician, she delayed making an appointment for 4 months. Lacey Spears moved into an apartment at the Fellowship community in New York, sharing the space with a fellow member, Christine O'Brien. Upon returning home from a trip, Christine noticed some of her clothes and personal items were missing and later spotted Lacey wearing her clothes. When confronted, Lacey walked away without explanation. Despite Christine's complaints, Fellowship leaders advised her to let it go, so she reluctantly did. Christine began noticing troubling behaviors such as Lacey manipulating Garnett's feeding tube and losing her temper with him in private, only to comfort him immediately after causing pain. Christine also heard Lacey screaming at Garnett during bath time, which led to further concerns. Despite reporting these issues to Fellowship leadership, Christine's concerns were dismissed, leading her to eventually leave the community. Lacey continued her pattern of deceit, claiming Garnett was severely ill. While posting contradictory photos of him playing happily, she finally took Garnett to the pediatrician in March 2013, 4 months after being referred. Lacey fabricated an extensive and alarming medical history for Garnett, including seizures, MRSA, and multiple surgeries, none of which were true. The doctor found Garnett to be perfectly healthy and referred him to specialists to determine if he still needed a feeding tube. However, Lacey repeatedly avoided scheduling the recommended feeding evaluation, knowing it would reveal the tube was unnecessary. Lacey's reluctance to remove the feeding tube was driven by her desire to maintain control over Garnett. The tube allowed her to administer substances that kept him sick, ensuring she remained the center of attention and sympathy on social media. Despite multiple doctors questioning the necessity of the feeding tube, Lacey persisted in her harmful behavior, demonstrating that her primary interest was in controlling and harming her son, not in caring for him. As Garnett grew older, Lacey's grip on him began to loosen, prompting her to take more drastic measures to maintain her charade. The manipulation and abuse intensified, with Lacey refusing to let go of the one tool that gave her ultimate control over her son's health and life. After moving to the fellowship, Lacey Spears began supplementing her need for attention by accusing male members of sexual harassment. She reported one man to the police for allegedly exposing himself, a claim he vehemently denied. Although he was told to stay away from her, no further action was taken. Lacey later accused another man of harassment, leading to his and his wife's expulsion from the fellowship without a chance to defend themselves. When Garnett started kindergarten at the Waldorf school, Lacey made sure every parent knew about his supposed health issues and her fictional deceased fiancé, Blake. However, inconsistencies in her stories, such as claims about Garnett's cochlear implants, began raising suspicions among other parents. Garnett's teacher noticed that the boy's behavior and appetite didn't match Lacey's descriptions of a sick child. In December 2013, Garnett entered his 5th and final year of life. After Christmas, while in Florida, Lacey emailed Garnett's teacher claiming he had been hospitalized with a high fever and vomiting. Yet when she returned, Lacey denied ever taking Garnett to the hospital, and her family confirmed he hadn't been there. Despite Lacey's claims that Garnett was frequently ill, his teacher reported that he was healthy and happy in school. In early January 2014, Lacey began fabricating symptoms again, telling doctors that Garnett had fevers, night terrors, and trouble eating. His teacher, however, observed him eating well and even asked Lacey to pack larger lunches. Lacey's claims about Garnett's symptoms only occurring when they were alone are a hallmark of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. On January 12th, Lacey continued her pattern of online searches, this time focusing on sodium levels in children, including what happens with elevated sodium and the dangers of hypernatremia, a potentially fatal condition. The next day, she took Garnett to the emergency room, claiming he had 2 seizures, one right in the waiting room. The hospital found his sodium levels slightly elevated, but not enough to cause seizures. After observation, Garnett was discharged. Lacey was frustrated by the hospital's dismissal and falsely told friends that Garnett's sodium levels had been dangerously high. On January 16th, Lacey took Garnett back to his pediatrician, who also found him perfectly healthy. That evening, Garnett's teacher visited their home and found Garnett in distress, with an IV pole and pump set up nearby. Shortly after the teacher left, Lacey used the pump to administer a milky liquid into Garnett's stomach. Lacey then called a friend, Una, claiming Garnett was having a seizure and needed to go to the hospital. On the way, she even paused to take a photo of Garnett in his car seat for Facebook. At this new hospital, Lacey repeated her fabricated stories about Garnett's medical history, including his fictitious past with hypernatremia. The emergency room doctor, suspecting Munchausen syndrome by proxy, admitted Garnett for observation. An EEG and video were set up to monitor for seizures, but Garnett exhibited no symptoms while under observation, despite Lacey's claims of severe health issues. Garnett remained symptom-free during his hospital stay. On January 19, 2014, despite Garnett's EEG showing no signs of seizures, Lacey searched online for information about iodized salt and brain tumors. Later that morning, the hospital's camera captured Lacey taking Garnett into the bathroom, where she was seen handling his feeding tube and a large cup. When they emerged, Garnett, previously happy and active, was suddenly lethargic. Minutes later, Garnett began dry heaving, prompting Lacey to call for a nurse. As doctors attended to Garnett, Lacey took a photo of her suffering son and posted it to Facebook, seeking sympathy rather than focusing on his recovery. Despite blood tests showing normal sodium levels, Lacey took Garnett into the bathroom again later that afternoon. Once more, he became lethargic and began dry heaving. This time, his condition rapidly worsened, leading to a full-blown seizure. Doctors were forced to intubate Garnett as his sodium levels spiked to a deadly 182, leaving medical staff in disbelief. Garnett was airlifted to Westchester Medical Center, where Dr. Carrie Goldsman, director of the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, immediately suspected foul play upon learning about Garnett's feeding tube. He questioned Lacey, who falsely claimed Garnett hadn't been fed through the tube for a week. Despite Garnett showing signs of improvement and his sodium levels dropping slightly, Lacey resisted the doctor's decision to remove his breathing tube, likely fearing Garnett would reveal what had happened. As Garnett pleaded to go home, Lacey continued posting misleading updates on Facebook, claiming he was in severe pain, despite nurses reporting he was doing well. On January 21st, Garnett's condition took a devastating turn when he stopped breathing. A nurse found an empty water bottle under his bed, directly disobeying Dr. Goldsman's strict instructions not to give Garnett water due to the risk of brain damage. Garnett was rushed for a CAT scan, which revealed that his brain had swelled to the point of brain death, caused by the excessive sodium Lacey had administered. Dr. Goldsman immediately notified the hospital's child abuse pediatric program and the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. Detectives quickly pieced together the evidence, concluding that Lacey had poisoned Garnett through his feeding tube. A search of Lacey's apartment revealed incriminating items, including an IV stand, a used IV bag with white fluid, and 2 containers of salt. In a desperate attempt to cover her tracks, Lacey called a friend, Valerie, asking her to remove and dispose of the IV bag from her apartment. Despite the police having already photographed the scene, Valerie complied. After hiding the IV bag at Lacey Spears' request, Valerie, feeling guilty, confided in a coworker and later reported the incident to fellowship leadership. The IV bag was retrieved and handed over to the police, who soon obtained a warrant to collect additional evidence, including an IV pole and pump. On January 23, 2014, Garnett was pronounced brain dead. Tests on the IV bags confirmed dangerously high levels of sodium, and Garnett's autopsy revealed he had no underlying medical conditions. His death was ruled a homicide. As the murder investigation unfolded, Lacey refused to cooperate, claiming the hospital had made a mistake. However, detectives meticulously pieced together her actions, including the damning video footage of her administering salt to Garnett in the hospital bathroom. In June 2014, Lacey was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. During the trial, prosecutors laid out the horrifying timeline of Garnett's life, revealing how Lacey, a compulsive liar, had poisoned and tormented her son to gain sympathy. They showed how Garnett, a healthy child at birth, was subjected to unnecessary surgeries and constant medical attention at Lacey's behest. As Garnett grew older and began to show signs of independence, Lacey's control over him weakened, leading her to take drastic measures to maintain her narrative. Ultimately, she overdosed him on salt, leading to his death. Despite overwhelming evidence, including her internet searches about sodium poisoning and the testimony of medical professionals, Lacey maintained her innocence. She refused to admit her guilt, even after being found guilty of second-degree murder on March 2, 2015. The judge, acknowledging her apparent Munchausen syndrome by proxy, sentenced her to 20 years to life, expressing hope that she would seek treatment, a possibility that seems unlikely given her refusal to accept responsibility. Her story is one of manipulation, lies, and a cold, calculated indifference to the life of her son. Lacey will be eligible for parole in 2034, but unless she admits her guilt, it is doubtful she will be released anytime soon. Thanks for watching Secret Sleuths. If you enjoyed this documentary, hit subscribe and the bell icon to stay in the loop. See you in the next case.